So as I mentioned earlier, we are observing the day of Pentecost today, as well as starting this worship series. Pentecost is that yearly celebration of that event that occurred as recorded in Acts chapter 2, which Sean read for us earlier. Now, the thing is that we get kind of thinking about or accustomed to thinking about church as a building. And so, just being reminded that on that first Pentecost day, it wasn't that there was a building to consecrate or dedicate. There wasn't a new membership class being offered or, a baptism, vows taken. It really was the start of a movement of God's Spirit through God's people called the church. This is what we celebrate about Pentecost. And so we get the imagery of the wind that blew through the room with the disciples, of the tongues of fire that enabled them to speak in ways they never knew they could speak. It enabled Peter to give this amazing speech and move a lot of people to transformation. This movement of God's Spirit, though, wasn't something new to God's people. God's Spirit has always been at work throughout the generations. From the very beginning of time, we even hear in Genesis 1 how God's Spirit hovered over the chaotic waters of creation, bringing forth order and bringing together all of God's dreams for God's creation. It is by God's Spirit that the prophets then received the words that God desired for them to speak. Now, we heard just a portion of that Pentecost story from Acts 2. If we had read beyond chapter or verse 13, we would have heard Peter then quote the prophet Joel, that passage that I just read to you, or a portion of it. Now, let's just be reminded again that the minor prophets and their messages are not insignificant. They are very powerful. Generally, as I said, kind of addressing a particular event or a particular group of people. There's something for us to hear in each of those prophets. And so today was like an overview of minor prophets, and so Eric didn't necessarily assign a position on the baseball team to today's Joel passage, but I think that the prophets are like baseball game announcers. Right? Like the ones that kind of announce the game. I think about some of those good, from way back, Bob Uecker, Harry Carey, Mel Allen. Right? These announcers had a way of bringing to life the game for those who were only listening. Because indeed, this might be a surprise for some of you, not every house had a TV in it at one time. And in fact, so people would have to tune in to their AM radios to follow their favorite baseball team. And these announcers were able to bring to life, to be able to help people visualize what they could not see. One of these announcers is Jack Brickhouse, and we're going to listen to Jack call that famous catch by Willie Mays in the 1954 World Series.
There's a long drive, way back in center field, way back, it is gone! Willie Mays just brought this crowd to its feet with a catch which must have been an optical illusion to a lot of people.
We're used to a little bit clearer audio, aren't we, in these days of digital? But at the time, this would have brought so much energy to the people listening to imagine what it must have looked like for Willie Mays to make that catch. Luckily, we had footage to watch as we listened. This is what the prophets have done for us. They put to words what God would like us to visualize that is going on in our world. When we hear the prophet Joel speak, we are entering into this particular event that is happening in the life of God's people. And while there are some, debates about when exactly Joel lived, when he spoke, we think it's somewhere around an exile. and a time in which people are wondering how it is that God is working, when God's people have times of really abundance, where fields are ripe with harvest, when things are being rebuilt. But then there's this event that happens in which a swarm of locusts moves through the land and decimates everything, absolutely devastates the people's livelihoods, the crops, the fields. It looks like a war zone. Now, this is not something that you and I have an easy time imagining. I've never seen a swarm of locusts. I've stepped on a few grasshoppers, but this swarm of locusts must have just been amazing. And what happens, and we don't see it very much here because it kind of is dependent, these swarms are dependent on a particular ecological happening or atmosphere. So we don't get it here. We're just a little too humid. And all these other elements come together, and these locusts that are few in number get all riled up. When they get riled up, they start to multiply very quickly, which riles up even more of them. And then they even kind of change colors and they change shape, and they become angry hoarders and will eat everything, tear down all kinds of things. And in this aftermath of this swarm of locusts, the people are saying, God, what did we do? We've already been in exile. We've already paid that price. What is it that we have done, God? And God answers through the prophet saying, listen, someday I will pour out my Spirit on everyone. You will be restored. Those who survive will be brought together. There is hope because I am the one at work. I am the one who will bring judgment on those that need judgment, and I will bring peace on those who deserve peace. I will speak, and you will prophesy, all of you. You see, God's Spirit didn't stop talking through the prophets, the minor prophets. God's Spirit didn't stop sending messages to just the apostles. God's Spirit continues to speak to each one of us. God said, I will pour out my Spirit on your sons and daughters. Your old men will dream dreams. Young men will see visions. Now, most of you have, I'm sure, heard of Babe Ruth, right? But do you know about Babe Pinelli? Pinelli was an umpire in the Major League Baseball, and he once called the great Bambino out on strikes. And when the crowd began to boo their disapproval of the call, Babe Ruth turned to the umpire and said, there are 40,000 people here who know that last pitch was a ball. Now, the coaches and players were ready to see the great Bambino ejected from the game, but Pinelli responded calmly, that may be so, Babe, but mine is the only opinion that matters. This is the challenge of us listening for the Spirit today, is that there are a lot of voices around us. There are folks who will try to tell us something about how God is at work. We may try to look at the prophets and think that they have predicted what we are going through, but I would caution us to remember that the Bible is to help us interpret our times, how we are to live in these days. We don't take what's happening now and try to interpret the Bible. God's Spirit is speaking to each one of us so that we might receive those messages of hope and peace, that we might know that God is at work creating and recreating, restoring, redeeming, speaking to each one of us and to the church as a whole. And so, my friends, let us tune in our ears. Let us gather together as Christ's body to encourage each other, to discern with each other, to listen to these messages of God's love and grace. Thanks be to God.